So we're here to talk about fast fashion and how we get new looks to the market. After listening to everyone's speeches today about shipping in 1 to 2 days, I feel like my job is very easy, where working with designers and developing product, it takes us 4 to 6 months to get product to the market. But again, different group of people. The next slide that I'm going to kind of talk about is what has changed. Everybody keeps talking about change and things are changing. In the fashion world, things are always changing. And I think it's part of just doing business. And yes, the consumer is changing how they shop. When you think about it, in the past, fashion houses, they'd put collections together in spring and fall. They would, deliver 2 collections a year, 3 collections a year. If you look at it today, online retailers have to deliver product every month or almost every week to keep their assortments fresh. And the customer today is shopping every day. Where in the past, when you think about it, when a consumer would go to a store, they'd go to a store maybe once a week, once a month. But today, you're shopping 24/7, and you have the ability to look at every brand, what prices are. I do a lot of competitive shopping, and I go to retailers and kind of study the consumer. And when you look at customers these days, they'll go into a store, they'll try on product, they'll see how it fits, they'll compare it to other brands, and then they'll sit down and order it online and look for the cheapest price. Macy's, we do a lot of business at Macy's, and I spend a lot of time there. But again, the consumer is almost using the store as a showroom, looking at the product and then figuring out what they want and then going online. It's like, why do you want to, have to carry a bag when you can sit there, hit your phone, and it's delivered to your house in the next day? So definitely things are changing in how consumers are buying, and shopping is a new world, but we have to adapt and figure out how to get, drive the business to your brand. Also, if you look at fashion houses, in the past, they would dictate what the looks were. Consumers would definitely follow fashion houses, and what the trends were, they would definitely buy, and you would see, I would say, people in all different cultures looking and dressing that way. If you look at today's consumer, they are creating their own curated looks. They're buying different pieces from different brands. They're putting together individual looks. No one wants to look the same. Everyone wants to be, an individual. Everybody wants to be different, and they're creating their own looks. And it's becoming difficult in the sourcing world, because if you look at the size of orders keep diminishing, but the assortments keep growing. So people want different things, but from a manufacturing standpoint, it's difficult on factories, because just like if you think about it like a car production line, usually like in a fashion world, in footwear and in apparel, you can make 2,000, 3,000 units a day on a production line. If you're only getting orders of 500, 600, units, it becomes very different and difficult for them to then start up and constantly start changing different styles. If you look at deliveries, like I was saying earlier, when the average delivery of goods from overseas is 30 to 45 days, but then when you look at what we were talking about earlier, when the consumer orders goods, they want them the next day, or now they even want them the same day. So it's becoming very challenging. Average production usually is like 60 to 95 days for product, but the entire cycle sometimes can take up to 6 months when you're talking about, starting with the design concept. Every time I meet with designers, I don't know, anybody a designer in here or work with fashion designers? This is my statement that I always get everyone focused on. Vision without execution is hallucination. Thomas Edison said it, and it definitely helps me set the stage, because a lot of times designers will design goods that maybe, if possible, you can make 2 a day on a production line, or it's, impossible to wear or impossible to actually make it. So it's very important when you're looking at fast fashion, you have to really look at who the consumer is, know your consumer, but also understand exactly, what you're designing to. This is probably the 3 most important things that I get asked all the time by the sales teams, by the designers. They want the cheapest cost, they want the shortest amount of timing, and they also want the best quality possible. The first and the last piece are very difficult to work together. Cost and quality don't go hand in hand. It becomes very challenging at times. It impacts, how you make your product, where you make your product. But again, the world today is requiring that, so you have to figure out ways of doing it and how to deliver. I always, talk about you don't want to deliver a T-shirt that after one wash is going to fall apart. Because, while you've achieved, you think, the price that the consumer is willing to pay, you're just damaging your brand, and it's really not doing anything to enhance that customer's vision of the brand. The most important thing in fast fashion is working on the development calendar. You have to ensure that everyone understands exactly where they fit into the development calendar. Each brand and every retailer is different, depending on what you're trying to develop. If you're a high fashion brand versus a mid-tier brand versus an entry price point brand, you should, though, develop a calendar and know exactly what you're trying to achieve. The thing that's really changing is that in the past, each one of these groups would work in a silo. Today, to deliver fashion fast, you have to work together. So sales and merchandising definitely have to put all their needs out there. They have to describe what the products, what's selling, what's not selling, and again, analyticals is very important. In the past, online today helps you to understand what your customer likes, what they don't like, what they're buying, what they're not buying, what sizes they're buying. So that's something that's becoming very important in making decisions with fast fashion. You definitely need that information to help you design your lines, figure out what you're building and what's not working. But again, these three silos have to work together. If they don't work together, it really slows down the entire process. So sales and merchandising have to work together to put together their sales plan, to give direction to the design teams. The biggest, I would say, fallout happens between sales and design. A lot of times they will design a line. Once they start showing it, then all of a sudden sales are saying that's not what the consumer wants, that's not what's selling, so they go back to the drawing board. So that's the most important collaboration right there to make it happen. Sourcing, I'm always involved now from the beginning through the end, because a lot of times, like I said, they'll design things that can't be made on a production line, or there are things that we know will never be able to cost out. That's one of the biggest challenges. A designer always, I always say, you can't, show a Mercedes and, sell a Ford. So they'll always go out into the market, they'll look for inspiration, they'll come back with fabrics that are wonderful, but when the garment supposed to cost $10 and the material is $10 a square yard, the math just does not work. Factory capacity. The biggest challenge that I face with factories is that they're constantly saying, and it's the truth, they have peaks and valleys. If you look at when we're delivering goods, we're delivering them, everyone is going to the factory at the same time. In the fashion world, December and January, you're delivering your new spring goods, so that's when their capacity is always full. And also in July, June and July for back to school, it's also at times. The problem is that factories can't operate with these peaks and valleys. And a lot of factories are going out of business because of this, because during the key months, they have 5,000 workers that they're employing. If they lose those workers, it takes them 3 or 4 months to retrain them. So a lot of times they're paying for the salaries during the valleys and they just, can't survive. This is probably the biggest complaint as a sourcing person when I go to factories. They're like, why can't you level out your orders? And again, retailers, and everyone in the market, there are peaks and valleys. There are holidays that we all deliver goods to, so it becomes very difficult. One of the things, though, I try to work with the designers to do is look at the entire line. Each brand is very different, but as far as core products, those are products that you can reorder that are basic. You can recolor them, or you're just doing a style in new materials. A lot of times designers look at their line as one entire thing and try to design it and deliver it at one time. If you can look at it and break it down by this, it helps with the sourcing piece of it. So your core products, you can plan ahead. you can fill in those valleys with the factories and make your core products first. The on-trend products, you can then start planning after the core products because you have more experience with those types of products and you're just working on the development of that. The trending product is the newest and hottest fashion out there. And that's the stuff that you would wait last and develop that last because you want to be as on trend as possible. Without process and procedures, though, it's impossible to deliver fast fashion. You really have to make sure that you're planning ahead. You have to look at your material supplier base. If you're developing product in China and your materials are coming from India or Bangladesh, you have to look at that. Sometimes the materials could take a month to a month and a half sometimes to get them produced and then shipped to the country where you're developing your product. The other thing I work with the design teams to do is to develop their materials in advance. Materials and colors are always provided, by different shows. So if they shop trends, they're seeing that way before they're seeing the actual styles developed. So if you develop that in advance, it helps you because once you see then what styles you're developing, you already have your materials and all your colors confirmed and ready to go. The other thing that's becoming critical with online is your global fit standards. You have to look at the different factories you're working with and ensure that the fit, say from India to China, is coming out the same. Each factory is always slightly different, exactly how they work, what kind of, how the workers work, the machines, the cutting, the stitching, and that's something that you really have to ensure today. Because the consumer, if they're buying one piece of your goods and they get it, then they reorder something from another country and it doesn't fit, then again, like everybody said earlier, you've lost that customer because that experience to them is not worth coming back to your brand. The other thing is deciding where your business is. You have to figure out exactly what market you're going after and then try to get your sourcing as close to those markets of fast fashion. Again, if you look at material lead times, duty, and freight, sometimes if you're talking of getting materials from one country to the other and it's taking you 2 months, that really reduces your fast fashion. And then as we also talked earlier, you have to develop different shipping models. Maybe for your real high-end fashion goods, you use air freight. But for your basic core things, you can produce them earlier and put them on a vessel and take longer to deliver them to the market. And again, looking, like we said earlier, at the fashion world, the design teams and the designers that are working in fashion really are not very structured. They're, I would say, have a different mentality than, say, other engineers, and they're strictly looking at things from an aesthetic, and like with materials, they always have to have something. I have to have this fabric, or I have to have this color. But sometimes it can take months to get that, or even the pricing, like I said, does not work for the equation. But again, fast fashion is definitely here to stay. The consumer, like I said, is shopping every day. They want newness. They want to see new product on your site. So it's very important that you have to figure out different ways to deliver for them.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.